And so we think we know maybe what body is. We think maybe we know what soul is. So let's hear what Srila Prabhupada's got to say, and we'll find out. So it's a famous verse. It's chapter 2, text 13. And but first we'll offer prayers of respect to the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, for those who know it, you know, if you haven't got a book, you can repeat after me. But otherwise, if you can pick it up as we go along. But maybe. So what I do is read the first line and then we chant together the repeat. Okay. So this is chapter 2 and it's text 13. Dehinosmin yata dehe. Komaram yovanam jara.
Komaram yovanam jara.
Tatati hantara praptir.
Tatati hantara prapti.
Tirastatra namuyate.
Tatra namuyate.
So if you repeat after me, the word for word translation. Dehina.
Dehina.
Of the embodied.
Of the embodied.
Asmin.
Asmin.
In this.
In this.
Yatha.
Yatha.
As. Dehe.
Dehi.
In the body.
In the body.
Komaram.
Komaram.
Boyhood.
Boyhood.
Yovanam.
Yovanam.
Youth.
Youth.
Jara.
Jara.
Old age.
Old age.
Tata.
Tatra.
Similarly.
Similarly.
Deha.
Deha.
Antara.
Antara.
Of transference of the body.
All transference of the body.
Prapti.
Prapti.
Achievements.
Achievements.
Dhira.
Dhira.
The sober.
Sober.
Tatra.
Tatra.
Thereupon.
Thereupon.
Na.
Na.
Never.
Never.
Muyati.
Muyati.
Is deluded.
Is deluded.
So English translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So if you repeat after me each phrase. As the embodied soul
As the embodied soul
continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body at every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates into another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there is no cause for lamentation. So, there is no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on the account of death, either of Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old ones to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, they were surely going to have spiritual bodies in their next life, or at least a life in the heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause for lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called Dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of spirit cannot be entertained, on the ground that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable, against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatan, and are called kukshara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into the material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so. Even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life of bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in the water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to living entities, and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the super soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then their relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy, Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other being instructed. Such instruction would be useless, because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is superior in position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is forgetful, who is a forgetful soul, deluded by Maya. Om Adhyanatimrantasya Jananjana Salakeya Chakshon Milatam Yana Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatrupiyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanabeyo Vaishnavabeyo Namo Namaha. So the first principle that we find here, that the body is temporary. It's made of the material elements, material nature, earth, water, air, fire, ether, and also the mind, intelligence, and false ego. They're material things. The one is gross body and the other one is subtle body. But they finish at death, in that the gross body deteriorates into the gross elements. But the subtle body, which has been created by false ego, has been created by our desires in this life, goes to another body to fulfill the unfulfilled desires of this life. So it gets a certain type of body. And so this is why we have many different types of body. We've got each different types of desires. So even in this lifetime, we're now creating our next body. So our good fortune is that we're listening to Bhagavad Gita, and we're taking to this spiritual path, which means the possibility of getting a spiritual body. Prabhu says we can either get a spiritual body or a material body next lifetime. If we get a spiritual body, it is of the same nature of the soul. It's eternal. And it goes to an eternal realm, eternal world, an eternal existence with Krishna, or to the expansion of the Lord, of which they are attracted. Some will go to the planet of Lord Ram, or Vishnu, where they take the same form as Vishnu. So, or that they, and in each of these planets there's different relationship. So when we get a spiritual body, we can still be eternal, but in different worlds. But Prabhupada says the goal of life for us is to go with Krishna, to become attracted to Krishna. And how do we become attracted to Krishna? The interesting part of this is, it's like we get to know each other. Bit by bit, we form a relationship. We talk to each other, we share with each other. And then we start to know the person who we're with. Likewise, we get to know Krishna through Bhagavad Gita as it is. First and foremost, because it comes from Krishna, and he's telling us who we are, who each of us are, but also he's telling who he is. So we can get to know him. What is his position in relation to us, and what is our relationship to him, and also how he's the creator, and how he's fire, how he's the taste in water. He's given us so many descriptions of himself, but also he comes 5,000 years ago in his original form. So we can see what Krishna looks like in his original spiritual form, and it's only 5,000 years ago. We talked about this at the Yoga Center today. How Krishna comes once in a millennium, and in terms of the time in this planet, that's 8,600,000 million years. So it's not very often. But we're very close to when he appeared. Only 5,000 years ago he appeared in this millennium. So we still have this knowledge close to us. So it's fortunate position. But when he came to this world, he also said, this Bhagavad Gita is supreme science. I'm giving to you again, because it's been lost in the course of time. Time destroys everything in this world, even our knowledge. It gets changed, twisted, altered. So we're fortunate in that we're in a Iskcon and Prabhupada's movement, that in such a way it's through disciplic succession, all the way from Krishna. And the only qualification that these pure souls have is that they don't change anything Krishna says. That we find out exactly what he says and who he is, without their calculation or a mental concoction. They say real intelligence is speaking what Krishna says. That's real intelligence. You know, so Prabhupada explains that we only have to say what Krishna says to anybody, that even a child. There was this Mother Malati, she had a child, and she was asked by a reporter, this little child, "Who's Krishna?" And she said, "The Supreme Personality of Godhead." Just like that. She was about 4 or 5. And this was perfect. Perfect knowledge. Because she's repeating what she's heard. It's not come from her imagination. It's come through the disciplic succession. So we can understand that we can help anybody, you know, in our Krishna consciousness. What little bit we know, we can just pass on to anybody. And it's the best. Because it is not artificial. It's not that you become, you know, the most sort of learned, scholarly type of person of the scriptures. No, it's not like that. We try and repeat what Prabhupada has said. Now, earlier I listened to a lecture by Prabhupada, and he explains, you know, very nicely what is the soul and the body. He says, also, there's another soul in here. He talks about the super soul in the body. So, the super soul is the Supreme Lord Himself in every individual person in their heart, accompanying the spirit soul. So, He's also in this body, as well as our individual soul. Now, he says that we must understand that our soul is in like a building. It's housed in a body of a certain type and a certain facility. So he says that because we're like a tenant in a building, we live there. We live in this body like a tenant in a building. But we're not the proprietor of the building. We don't own the building. We're there. We're just a tenant. It's been given to us by the Supreme Lord. It's a super soul. He gives us a body to suit our desire. And then he says the owner of the body is the Supreme Lord, super soul within the heart. He's the actual proprietor of the body. So now we know the constitutional position of this body and the soul relative to the Supreme Lord and our desire. Because this our body will always have a certain type of desire. You may like oranges, but I don't. But it doesn't make you right and me wrong. It's just that you have different desires, different tastes, different attractions. So the spirit soul is in a body that is like a building, and according to their past lifetime, they're given a particular type of building. You know, it can be in a rich man's building, you know, a rich situation in a rich family, or it can be in a poor man's building, you know, just a little hut, or just living under a tree or something. You know, it depends on our previous lives' activities. So we're given a certain body, not only according to our desires, but according to our qualification. We have to be qualified for a certain type of body. So Prabhupada explains also that some people, they have wonderful intelligence, beauty, all this. This is due to usually to pious activities in their previous life. So they're attractive outwardly, and this gives them advantage in this day and world, in that it can facilitate their desires. But sometimes it's not such a good thing. So we can see that, you know, like with the film stars, very good looking or very talented musically, but somehow they're unfulfilled, and they even take their own lives because of their unhappiness. They don't know about spirit, they don't know about Krishna, God. And so they think all they are is this body. And so when we think we're this body, then we're going to be dissatisfied because it's nothing to do with the person inside. If we're just attracted to the external nature of each other, then love cannot exist. It's just on a physical level, an attraction, senses, just based on the senses, which are just dull matter, actually. It's just that the spirit soul animates that body in such a way that the senses are activated. And those are activated in such a way it fulfills the desire of the previous false ego, the mind and the intelligence from previous life. So it's like a machine, this body. You know, you can have a sports car, or you can have just a little Volkswagen saloon, you know, depending on your desire in your body. So that's the type of body you can get. Your body's a fast car. It can do many things. It's impassioned. It has many desires. You know, it wants money, wants power, prestige. Or you can have the body which is reviving, or it's some previous contact with spiritual life. And you're given this knowledge, never loses, it's never lost. It carries on with you. Spiritual knowledge travels with you in your next body. But the material knowledge, it's gone. All you have is your desire on the material level. And then this body will automatically become attracted to those things you desire. And then somehow or other, the intelligence that you've been given will achieve this desire. You know, you've got some people, they're so motivated that they can make so much money. They can make so much money. And there are others that they're foolish with money. And they'll always be poor. Always. Or they'll have it taken away from them. This is their karma. You have to accept that. So, this body is nothing but a bag of desires. And it's material. It's insignificant compared to the soul. The soul is so powerful. It animates the body. It animates the body with consciousness. But also, the soul has a pure nature, a special nature. And it has a joyful nature. It's full of knowledge, full of bliss, and eternal. But it's been covered with a material body. We can understand that, or we've been given to understand by the great souls, that the body has come into this world because it desired to enjoy itself, for itself, rather than Krishna be the enjoyer. It's come into this world to for it to be the enjoyer, for some reason. It thought, well, I wonder what it's like to enjoy myself. Like children, they want to run away from their parents, and you have to chase after them. They may get run over. It's dangerous, isn't it? They're like that. They have their little bit of independence. We can see, can't we? We can't stop that. The children are always active. It's their nature. And so, like we see in Krishna's pastimes, they can be very naughty. Krishna was very naughty. He stole things, stole butter, Poor Mother Yashoda, she was finding it very difficult with Krishna. But this was a loving naughtiness, They actually really liked Krishna being naughty. It endeared them to, they became close because of this. It was part of a loving exchange. So, Krishna, he sees us as naughty children. We've sort of run away. but he feels that maybe we can come back, they should be corrected, so he sends this Bhagavad Gita for us, and so that we can find a way back to him. What is spiritual life? What is spiritual knowledge? That will help us have new desires, because by practicing what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, we can change our desires to spiritual desires. Just by hearing about Krishna, by hearing about the spiritual knowledge. When we start to hear, we start to become attracted. It's a sound vibration. It's something that is directly speaking to the soul that has forgotten Krishna. It's reviving our consciousness. Like an amnesia patient, they've lost their memory, they go to the hospital. And then to revive the memory, the doctors, they bring all their family. Don't you remember this? Don't you remember that? They're trying to revive the memory. Likewise, Krishna is trying to revive our memory of him, our relationship with him, which is always there, actually. It's just for some reason we thought we'd try and enjoy ourselves separate from Krishna. But our original relationship is still there with him. So Prabhupada explains to us, we have to somehow revive it by this practice of bhakti yoga, devotional service. And devotional service is actually the essence of the soul's nature. It says in the Shikshakstakam prayers, Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitamam vishami bhavam buddho kripaya tava parapankaja sutite tuli sadrishim vichintaya. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I'm your eternal servant. Yet somehow or other I've fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So that somehow or other we're an eternal servant. The nature of the soul is to serve. Why? Because the nature of love is service. When we have relationships with each other, our nature is that we should want to give something. As we start to have a loving relationship, we try and find ways of giving to each other to please each other. This is loving exchange. But if we get a material body that's so overpowered by its senses in the mode of passion, actually the love turns into lust. In other words, I want my body satisfied. You are to supply my needs, so there's no loving exchange. It's all based on me. So very lonely place, this relationship in the mode of passion, because they cannot have loving exchange. Their loving exchange means that it's based on the senses and the body. And when it's based on dull matter, senses, it's not based on spirit, the person. It's just based on satisfaction in the body. And eventually this body just loses its senses with age. You can't taste things. You're not so fit as you used to be. Just all the senses just deteriorate. So no matter, and even later on, you see people, men in discos, they're in their 80s or 90s trying to enjoy still from their body, which actually can't give them any sense pleasure at all. It's finished actually. But somehow they're trying to arouse the sense pleasure again. And they just get frustrated and angry. And they die unhappy. Because they're not fulfilled. They have not fulfilled their spiritual nature. So this is difference between body and spirit. Body is dead matter, animated by spirit, soul. This is body and soul. Questions?
Is there any way of finding out what, assuming, if I speak for myself, if I died today, is there any way of finding out what body I'll get? Or it may be animal, I don't know, maybe bad things.
You know, actually, in this Krishna consciousness movement, it's all optimism. Why? Because we have chanted the Lord's holy names, and this guarantees human form of life. It's been purified to such an extent that we should get a body, and we start off from this point where we've had this spiritual knowledge. This spiritual knowledge is not lost. So if we leave our body, and our desire is to somehow, though we've fallen down for some reason, something's happened on our spiritual practice, that we haven't quite made it, we're not pure yet, still it will continue in the next lifetime. And in terms of eternality, it's a short time. You know, so actually it's all optimism, in fact, because we've started this special path, this special a path back to forming a relationship with Krishna, and it doesn't deteriorate in the course of time. It stays there. So don't worry. That's the message. You've started. You know, we can. Yeah, each of us can. We can leave this world at any moment. We don't know. But each moment then becomes precious. We start to realize if we leave this body at any moment, then each moment is precious on how we use it, how we spiritualize these little moments that we have left. You know, when you're an older person, you start to realize, you know, like I have so many years left, and a minimum number of years, and it's like if I live the span of a child 5 years, I'll be fortunate. 5 more years. It's a very short time, isn't it? It's like you've got an illness and they say you've only got so-and-so to live. It's a very short time. So you do with what you've got. Krishna gives everything anyway, according to our desire. If you desire spiritual, he'll give you. If you desire material, he'll give you. It's all based on our desire. So each moment, if we desire to serve Krishna, he says, Prabhupada explains, what is Krishna consciousness? He says that if we think, whatever I'm doing now, this thought, how can I make this Krishna conscious? That is spiritual. Just that question you're asking yourself, whether you be in your work job, with your children, you're cleaning the house, how can I make this spiritual? And Krishna says, it's a really nice sloka, 927 I think it is. Sorry, I'll have to look it up. I spoke it this afternoon. He says, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever you do, he says, whatever austerity, what difficulties you go through, do it for me. Link with Krishna. He says, it's very nice. It's a change of consciousness. Instead of doing it for yourself, do it for Krishna. Instead of, thinking, I should be cleaning my house, making it tidy, and thing. The motive is to please Krishna. It's his house. These are his children. We look after them for him. They're not ours. We do it as a service to him. So whatever we do, we can transform it into a service. We've got a job. We do that job as nicely as possible. Krishna gave us this job. We should fulfill our duties in life. It's not that we do a job, because I'm getting money and so I don't have to really try hard. No, we've been given that job to utilize our life force that in such a way that it's service, that there's some love in what we do. We try and do with some enthusiasm. We try and fulfill ourselves, not half-live, half-hearted. We don't do things half-hearted, we do things with full heart. Whatever it is, in such a way that Krishna's pleased. And it may seem, sometimes so difficult to do this. Our lives, we try and please someone, but we can't please them. But you try. We try. We try to please somebody. We try and please someone. Whatever relationship it is, whether in our loving relationships at home with family, or in our work environment, wherever we are, on the bus, in a cafe, whatever that place is, that it's a loving exchange, that you form a relationship with the person that's there, that you communicate on such a level that it's not treating them as though they don't exist, that they're there for me, that it's there for me, and I give them what I want on the basis on how much they can give to me. It's not a business deal. We just give everything we've got as a person. Fulfill our life force. It's nature, soul. Soul never criticizes. Soul only sees Krishna in everything. Behind everything. How can you, if somebody says, I like this, but I don't like this, so I like this bit of Krishna, but I don't like this bit of Krishna. Isn't it? We're actually choosing the bits of Krishna we like, because it's related to our senses, our body, our ego. But actually, Krishna's behind everything. He's the source of everything. Happiness and distress. He's the source of everything. Why? It's to educate us. It's to help us understand the nature of this world and who we are. And that we're not meant to live here. This is not our home. It's telling us, come home. Come home to me. This world, that's the message of this world. It's not your home. Come home to Krishna. But we live in such a way in this world, like it's Krishna's spiritual world. We transform our activities into spiritual activities. And that's activities of the soul. That's why you then realize joy in what you do. When you have this mood of service, you start to feel happy. I don't know if that sort of answers the question. It's a bit long-winded, but so don't worry, the whole thing. It's what you do in this moment. Time is short. Don't matter. Each moment can be perfect in Krishna consciousness. If you leave that body and that particular moment, your life is perfect. If you have that Krishna consciousness, you go to Krishna, you get spiritual body. So it's just having this faith that each moment is precious, and somehow how can I use it for Krishna and please him? And as service, in an act of worship. Whatever you do it as an act of worship.
You say that Krishna fulfills our desire, but why don't he take any prompt action, our desire?
Why doesn't he?
Why doesn't he take, fulfill immediately our desire?
Well, let's put it this way. Back to yoga is to do with love. If you desire to go back to Krishna, we can say, why doesn't he take me back now? I want him. I want to go back to him. But do we? See, our problem is that somehow we are attached to things in this world as well as maybe our spiritual life. We like both. We want both. But there has to come a point where we lose the attraction for this material world, and it has no attraction for us. And all that attracts us is the spiritual nature of Krishna. So he'll fulfill your desire only up to the point you desire. He reciprocates, says in Bhagavad Gita here. He says, I shall reciprocate according to one's surrender. So what we do, we don't separate what we do in our day-to-day activities, our job, or whatever we're doing. We include it in all our activities for Krishna with our consciousness. So we got to give full consciousness to Krishna, and that's the best. And he'll fulfill your desire if you're. And because would you, Krishna, when it's love, it means if somebody loves him, he'll give anything to that person. But Krishna will only give what is beneficial for us. He knows what's good for us, and he knows what's not so good. If you go back to the spiritual world and you're not purified, it'd be like putting a person who likes drink or in a pub into a temple life where there's no drinks. We'll be unhappy because we'll become agitated. It won't be natural to us. No. So what we have to do, we have to be qualified, because Krishna, he gives himself to love, and that is a very risky thing. You don't give your love to anybody. You have to be qualified. Somehow you get to know the person, form a relationship. So you have to become trustworthy with love. So if your desire is for spiritual, you have to be worthy. We have to become worthy of giving his love, because he gives his love back to us. In other words, he gives himself. This is bhakti. He surrenders to his devotee's love, actually. This way, the devotee becomes even greater than Krishna, because Krishna is conquered by love. As you can see with Mother Yashoda, who was tied with ropes. He surrendered to her love. This is loving exchange. Does that sort of answer the question? Does it answer the question, do you think, to some way?
Yeah.
About your...
But actually, if he fulfills immediately, maybe our trust will be more. And we can surrender immediately.
Oh, but that's a business deal.
As we are material.
That's a business deal. We got to give ourselves in such a way that we're not asking anything in return, basically, but to serve him. You see? It's the service. You see, service is the goal of life. Because service means love. And if you've got no love in your life, where's happiness? Where's peace? Where's relationship? Oh, it's not, or maybe, I'll love him more if he gives me something. Like child, they want toys. Oh, you don't love me because you're not giving me what I want, isn't it? How many times you hear children say that? You don't love me. It's like a blackmail. So I'm not going to love you. Children are very clever. They sort of know what button to press, to hurt the parents' feelings, You don't love me. Why don't you give it to me? I don't love you. Exchange, you know, it's a bit like that. We're childish in that way, actually. Isn't it? Yeah. But children are sort of innocent. They unknowingly do it. So it's based on this trust and love exchange, you know. You have to, if you want to give to somebody your love, you have to trust them. Because love means surrender. You give of yourself. You show who you are. You're not bothered by what people see or feel, or, you know, that person, they're so dear to you, you can have confidential talks. Loving exchange, reveal your heart. Because this person loves you, and they want your well-being more than anything. And likewise, you want their well-being more than anything. That's love. You know, you want their well-being more than you want your own well-being. You know, you see people that'll even sacrifice their life for their loved one, isn't it? Just do it. Their life is less precious to them. Likewise, devotions like that. Prabhupada showed that in his sacrifice of his own life, you know. Sri Prabhupada ki. I shall better finish here because the program's